And I'm sure we've gone way over time, but I'm very much enjoying talking shop with you.
Hey everybody, this is Chell from Notes from My Improv Notebook, your internet's resource for improv. Yay! Hey, thanks for listening to my podcast. I wanted to say sorry, I messed up. Episode 1 of Zach, I put in the wrong audio. I apologize. So if you go back and re-listen to that, it's actually Zach Huddleston's first episode. This is going to be episode 2. Thank you so much for tuning in. I appreciate you so much. I will be at the San Diego Improv Festival teaching my workshop, Your Play, Your Way, and I would love to have you there. Please, if you are interested, reach out. I would love to have you there. I have to make a video for them, so if you're interested to see what this is all about, you can watch the video. I am a little under the weather right now, which is why I sound like a great radio DJ. But I promise that'll go away soon, and I will be back to my very, very high voice that is unnatural for a 34-year-old. Anyways, I hope you have a good one. And here's episode 2 of Zach Huddleston. So, as a teacher at Westside now, what is a skill that you see students kind of having trouble with? What did you want to talk about?
Yeah. Well, so something that's like right on the tip of my tongue, because I literally was just kind of teaching it. I taught every Saturday, the Westside has like a drop-in class where it's wonderful. It's
What time is it at?
3 to 5 p.m. It's like $10. It's a rotating cast of teachers. They're often instructors at the Westside or veteran performers. I taught it yesterday. This is the second time I've taught it. And like, because it's just a drop in, like anybody can show up. You don't really I've taught people that it was like literally their first improv. And then there's like members of house teams at the theater who are like been doing it for many years. And yesterday, I think like 29 people showed up.
Wow.
Which is wonderful. And it kind of dovetailed perfectly with the theme I had in mind. Because like I've been thinking a lot about how we teach improv in general. And are we using the tenets of improv in the way we teach improv? Because I don't think we always do. I certainly haven't through a lot of my journey. And I was like, how many times have you thought about this? Like in a 3-hour improv class, you know, sometimes depending on the subject matter or whatever, how many of those minutes do you spend personally performing? Right?
Yeah.
I mean, who knows if it's like a Herald class where it's a big class and you're only in every other group, you know, maybe you get an hour of performance. Maybe if it's an intense scene study class, you might get to do 3 scenes in 3 hours and you're spending, you know, 2 hours and 45 minutes sitting or whatever.
Yeah.
And I think that can bum some people out. They're like, I paid for this class. I want a lot of the experience. And I was like, that's one way to look at it. I think that's a narrow, short-sighted view. Because I think what makes for good improv is being present in the moment, right? Being like intellectually, mentally involved in what's going on in your scene partner, right? Or what's going on stage. And in fact, like there's that great skill that you see wonderful ensembles have of like when people are on the back line and they are as involved in the scene as the people in the scene. That usually makes for good shows, good pieces, right? They're able to have these great callbacks and second beats and tag-ins and all these kind of wonderful things. And so I was like, why can't we try to focus more on that in class?
Yeah.
And especially like with 29 people, I mean, I tried to keep things moving, but you have to strike that balance of like, I want everybody to get reps and to be able to do stuff. But also, if reps made you good at improv, you wouldn't need instructors, right? You could meet with people in a parking garage and just run scenes and get great, right? Which we know is not the truth, right? You need like quality reps. You need feedback. You need notes. You need side coaching, all these kind of things. And so to strike that balance, I kind of gave this little speech at the beginning of class. And I was like, one thing that I think has helped me personally is coaching and teaching made me a much better improviser. As a coach or a teacher, you have to constantly be present in the work on stage, right? If you check out and start thinking about your shopping list or, you know, your date or your work, you know, or something else, you're going to miss what's going on. You won't be able to give good notes, feedback, things like that. So it's like, how about we all are teachers today? And I want everybody to be present in all the scenes. And can you be as actively involved in other people's work when you're sitting or on a back line as when you are on stage speaking? And that's all easy to say, but I'm like, we're going to implement this in 2 ways. And one, I had everybody like buddy up with somebody they didn't know. And I'm like, that's going to be your note partner. And at the end of class, I want you to give them 2 minutes of productive feedback, like positive things you like that they did.
Mm-hmm.
And then the second part, and I don't know, this is the first time I've ever done this yesterday. So that's why it's fresh in my brain. And I look forward to tweaking it and improving it. But I'm like, during today's class, I'm going to come to random people like on the back line or in the audience, if you're sitting, and I'm going to ask you like to repeat lines verbatim. And I'm going to ask you to give like positive feedback about what just happened on stage. Like I'm going to put you on the spot, like pop quiz style.
Yeah.
And I did that. And like a lot of people, I was like, yeah, what was the second line that they said? And like people would know it. And then other people would be like, I'm sorry, I don't remember. I wasn't paying attention, you know? And I was like, okay, yeah, this is kind of the lesson I wanted to impart. I don't know if you study meditation or Eastern philosophy or Zen or anything like that, like that kind of being present, being conscious is a skill that we can all work on.
It
and
is.
like, it's totally human for your mind to wander, for you to be distracted or to just be judging yourself and, you know, thinking about how dumb and unfunny you are after you get done with your scene, right? You go to the back line and you kick yourself in the butt for 3 minutes while other people are performing. But I think for good improv, you acknowledge, okay, my mind is wandering. I'm thinking about something outside of class, or I'm thinking about my own work. Let me check that and get back to being present.
Yeah, and what a great skill to teach, because I don't think that there are any there, at least when you're going through the classes like levels 1 through 4, there aren't really like any exercises that really teach this awareness skill that we must gain as performers. You must be aware, because being aware opens up the world to performers, right?
Yeah.
Being aware of physicality, being aware of intentionality, being aware of emotion through voice is such a wonderful skill to have. And what a wonderful exercise you put those students through. Did you find that for the people who just started, those were the people that weren't remembering, or did you find that it was the house teams that weren't remembering?
I mean, it was a mix. It was really a mix. And also some of that is like maybe sample size. I could only, you know, because again, almost 30 people, I could only call on people like once or twice in the course of the class, you know? And so if I caught them at a bad moment, that's fine. It was more just like, my hope was to keep them constantly on their toes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think like to me, one thing we don't get in improv training is, and I didn't get this in college either, but I know a lot of people that go to college, like their school has like a required like study skills class, you know, where like maybe freshman year, I actually did have kind of a class like that freshman year where they're like, this is how you should study and these are healthy habits and stuff like that. Like we kind of need that. Like it's not by default that you know how to be a good improv student.
Yeah.
And a lot of it's counterintuitive, right? And a lot of it, like, especially if you're taking classes as a 30-year-old, it's been a long time since you've been in any kind of classroom, maybe, right? And certainly if you're taking it as a 50 or 60-year-old, it could be decades and decades since you've been in a classroom setting, being instructed in anything. So I feel like we need to remind people and forgive them, you know, if they're not good at it, but we need to remind them how they can get the most out of these classes.
Yeah, and awareness is such an essential skill that seems like one of those things that like you'll learn as you go, but to bring those students to that awareness of like, oh, this is what it's like to be aware. It's like, whoa, what is going on? It's like David Foster Wallace's "This Is Water" speech, where basically an older fish sees two young fish. He says, how's the water? And the two young fish, they go, what's water? You know, the idea that as we're older, we're more aware. You're trying to impart that to your students. That's such a cool thing. I love that. I love that you're doing that. I know for me, I took classes later on in my journey, right? So I started when I was 21. And I came to IO when I was 30. So for me, I was watching classes, but when I wasn't on stage, because sometimes we'd have 12, 14 people, we'd only get like 2-3 chances on stage. You would watch other people and you would say, oh, I can see what he's trying to do. Like my awareness was trying to see how they would play and how each of their choices would make them. And that's me from sitting in the audience, because you're right. I would always try to get that extra rep by just watching intently to what was going on. You know, I love that aspect of style. What is your personal goal? Because you were teaching these students, like, this is what it's like to be aware. You were introducing to them. What is your goal when you perform of awareness? Like, what do you look for in yourself when you're aware on stage?
I think like a big marker for me when I am comfortable and probably doing better work, it's that simple thing of, do I wait for the other person to stop talking before I begin talking? You know, like that like, am I aware of what's going on? Am I letting them finish? Am I not thinking about what I'm going to say before before they're done speaking? That to me is like being present as much as possible in improv.
So letting them finish their thought completely before you even go into your mind of like, this is how I'll respond.
Yes.
Because at times, and I'm just assuming, you can correct me, at times do you find that as someone's saying something to you, you're already building up your response?
Yes. And I think that's unavoidable, and that's not a terrible thing.
But that's not your goal in terms of awareness.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I think just like letting them finish is such a big thing. And as I coach and teach, if there's even a little bit of overlapping dialogue, I'm like, we're not, because I mean, I think good improv is when you are obsessed with your scene partner, when the words coming out of their mouth are gold, and it's your job just to weave that gold, Rumpelstiltskin style, like, and if you are even cutting off their last little ellipses, words and syllables, you're not treating their words like gold.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. We have to assume that like, I'm talking, my scene partner is David Foster Wallace or Sylvia Plath or some other kind of genius, and every word that's coming out of their mouth is perfect and wonderful, and I need it, right? So even that tiny, because the alternative, talking over somebody or cutting them off, is the opposite. That's like, what I have to say is very important. It's not what you have to say is very important, right? And I think sometimes, maybe we're improvising with somebody who's a rambler or won't shut up or is clearly just like filling space with kind of verbal diarrhea. And
they're nervous, so they just keep talking.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. But you don't improve the work or you don't improve their play by cutting them off, right? Like maybe you think like, well, let me get some words in. That's usually coming from a place of insecurity for you, right? And of course, they're operating out of a place of fear and insecurity, but like it's like fire with fire there, right? Like you don't add insecurity on top of that. The work is really going to suffer at that point.
Yeah.
So like, I think that's something I think about. And like when I get off stage and I'm like not happy with the work I've done, it's like, oh yeah, I was cutting people off. I was just like saying words out of fear that I hadn't spoken enough or worried that I wasn't getting the laughs or whatever, which is like a terrible mindset.
It is a terrible mindset, but something that I think is reinforced inside of a, comedy theater, right? You are a comedy theater, so your goal is to get laughs, right? That's what improv theaters, you're like, I'm going to go to see improv tonight. Well, it's good to be funny because comedy's in the title, right? So we all have that milestone that we have to hit. And it's so funny that even after shows, we even become hyper aware of our moves. That to me is funny because if we just had that hyper awareness while we were in the show, it would be more helpful. But we're just like after a show, we're just like in the back of the minds going through it like a flip book of like, what did I do wrong? What did I do right? What do I need to, improve upon? How interesting. I also like the idea and something that you're really speaking to, which is that awareness, the result of awareness is patience. Patience and confidence in your own abilities, because you're basically saying that I'm going to listen to everything that this other person has to say. This other person is an artist. I'm going to listen to it. And then I'm going to respond because I'm confident in my own abilities and I'm being patient with my partner. Because there could be that one word or that one body movement that could just set off this like chain reaction of wonderful improv that no one has ever seen, right?
Yeah.
So I like that aspect of it. That is so smart to start making students aware of awareness. It's such a weird way to say it.
Yeah, I have like 11 things to say about that. Like you had so many great things you brought up. And I think one thing I always think about, we were talking earlier about the honor roll and the lottery programs at IO. One thing you would see with that, so often these groups of students would perform and like one or two kind of veteran house team members would perform with them, kind of like a rotating cast. And like it was always interesting to see that because often I would be watching those people on their normal teams and then see them play with the lottery. And it would be like one of two results. Either they were their absolute best. They were so supportive. They, were just great because they knew like, I need to take care of this student. the student is not going to be as confident or as savvy as I am because I've done 1,000 more hours of improv or whatever. So like I need to support them. I need to make what they're saying is important and all this kind of stuff. And like these performers were doing their literal best work with like level 2 students, or the opposite, right? And these people would come in being like, well, I'm the vet. I got the Letterman jacket on or whatever, right? So like I need to prove that I'm better than them. I need to like overwhelm them with my confidence and my aggression or whatever. And they would be their absolute worst, right? Because they would like, well, I got to do all the heavy lifting here. So like, get out of my way, kid, you know, and then tagging into everything or steamrolling or whatever. And it was interesting to see that. And it's like, well, can we need to acknowledge both of those things. And the irony was for those shows, we weren't giving notes to the veterans.
No, the veterans would leave, right?
Yeah. And then we just talked to the students about their experience. But like, that always stuck with me. And like, I personally, when I would be asked to perform with one of those groups, if we'd ever do a student jam or the few times I would perform with my class, it would often be like the best work I would do because I have that mindset. Whereas when we're performing with our teammates or our peers, that's often when we're in our own heads, or maybe we're judging them because we're like, oh, he's pulling that move again, or she's going back to that classic character she's done 200 times, or he's not listening to me again, or like this asshole is not nice to me off stage or whatever, right? As opposed to when you're performing with a student and you're just assuming like they need my help.
Yeah.
You know, which that's the mindset we should take into our teams.
I agree with that. Like treat them like a level 1 student who needs your help. Like, because there is that aspect of improv where I feel like my top of my play is when anyone ever says anything and then I go like, fuck it. Yes, let's do it. Like that total acceptance of their idea, the total acceptance of them as a person and just trying to facilitate whatever they say. Like that's when I feel like I'm at the top of my play, to just, no matter what's coming out, I'm going to do it. Let's do it. Let's find a way to do it.
And that's, I feel like that's one of the main joys of improv, right? Like, is that making somebody else's idea better, right? And like that's the sellable point of improv. Like I was talking to you earlier, I've recently started this kind of like corporate workshop, business skills, improv business. And it's like when you study on that, when you work with people in the corporate world, like, oh, that's the translatable skill. You know, being able to do an organic opening or imitate a grandfather clock does not help a Fortune 500 company, right? But this idea that is like goes against so many of our natural human instincts of putting yourself aside, pushing that ego onto the back burner for a moment to be able to build off of somebody else's idea and to bring your own abilities and knowledge and creativity to bear on somebody else's thought is like, that is a $1 billion idea, right?
Well, I think this goes back to the idea that ego is the barrier to awareness, right?
Yeah.
When we get our egos in the way, we're not going to be aware because we're constantly, we always go to those shows like, I'm going to kill it at this show. This show's going to be so easy. I know this stage. I've been here like 1 million times. I'm just going to have so much fun. And then we come away like, what did I do? Why am I still doing this kind of thing?
Well, and isn't that the old trope of like, oh, somebody's mom is in the crowd tonight, so that person's going to have the worst show of their life, right? Because they're either going to be trying so hard to prove to their mom why they moved to LA and like spend all her money or whatever, or they're going to be so extra self-conscious and worried about, oh, somebody made a sex joke and
it brings us out of the awareness.
And all of that just takes you out of being present, right? And is just going to put all these barriers between you and good work.
Oh, wow. Okay. So how can we make this an exercise that we can bring to students, that students can then take to their coach or take to their group so that they can do it? Would you say that the exercise is have someone watch a scene and then have that person pick out each person and like, hey, what was the 5th line, or repeat a line or something? What would be an exercise?
I think there's a couple good ones. I think every scene, every exercise you watch as a non-participant, you should have at least like one positive feedback note to give. And that could be like a specific you liked, a moment of strong point of view, physicality, whatever, right? But like, that's the other thing. I don't think we need to amp up our judgment of work, right? And I think that was a big part of my struggle as a teacher and a coach, right? And you know this from teaching and coaching, like, there's an infinite number of negative notes you can give on any scene, right?
Mhm.
You can talk forever about like, okay, that was nice screwdriver work, but the screwdriver could have been more accurate or
Yeah.
whatever, right? We can
Yeah.
get minute, and I don't think it's constructive and helpful and leads to better work.
No.
And so I think like the more we can be positive and celebrate the good things people are doing, because they'll be pretty aware of the bad things they did, I think, or the
Yeah.
instructor will or whatever. So like, can you have a positive note of feedback on everything that you see? I think that's a great one. I think another thing to do, yes, like, can you be in the scenes? So like, as you are aware, I think check that awareness as it drifts. If you start thinking about the scene you just did 3 minutes ago, if you start thinking about what you're doing after class or rehearsal or whatever, right? Like check that, acknowledge it, and then get back to being present and being inside that scene and constantly be thinking about like, what would I do in this moment? Why was what they just did so great? Because I think like, again, like that playing with the lottery mindset, if you choose to make this person a genius and a poet and an artist, right? And like, and your only job is to make the most out of these wonderful gifts they're giving you, it will lead to stronger play. So like, can we be practicing that from the back line and from the audience too? Of like, oh, what's the most fun I could have with that line they just said?
Yeah.
You know?
I think, yeah, that's a great way to put it. You know, I really feel that bringing awareness to students, especially earlier on, will only increase their skill as they go down the road. That's cool. Yeah. Okay. So basically, this exercise is you have a person or as you watch a scene, someone just checks in with everybody and gives positive feedback to the scene. And that's a way to kind of start your awareness journey. Like, oh, I'm watching this intently. And that's what we always want. We want the intent of sometimes on stage, I feel the intent is different. And this intent on this exercise, it's more about introducing that awareness to you. That's the intent. Where I think on stage is kind of like the intent of being aware is soaking up as much information as you can. Essentially, it comes back, right?
Yes.
We find ways to bring this back even in minor ways. Subconsciously, like it just all feeds in.
Yes. And I think, and let's treat all these things like the skills that they are. Being present is a skill. Positivity is a skill. Let's practice that skill more often. Let's get those reps instead of continuing to do the same shitty transaction scenes we've been doing for years, right? Like, let's practice those things that will actually lead to better work. And then I think like maybe a more specific exercise, which was your original question, I find to almost always be effective. And my wonderful longtime coach from my team, Heyday, Karen Gracci, who's
I love her. She's so good.
She's the best. And everybody on Heyday usually says that like she's the best. And like we're all teachers and coaches. And I know personally, like she's been maybe the single person that's been like the most important to my improv journey. She's a saint. Everybody should pay trillions of dollars to study with her.
Yes.
Just show up at her door and give her money, please. An exercise she's had us do a lot, and I think is great, and a lot of other people employ this, is like two people start a scene, and then at some point you swap out actors, right? And somebody else continues to play the same character.
Oh, wow. That's a good one.
Yes. And she specifically does it because her big thing, and I subscribe to this as well, is like clear emotional point of view, right? I think point of view, and this is like another 12-part series podcast right here talking about point of
Ken
view.
Burns version.
Yes. But I think like point of view is super important in improv. And for me, I like to keep things uber simple. And so like emotion is the clearest form of point of view to me. You're a sad character. You're a happy character. You're an angry character, whatever. And so she kind of does that of like, you pop in and continue to play that sad night watchman or that happy baker or whatever, right? And continue to use the details that have already been established, voice, physicality, all these kind of things. Like, boy, when you know, like at any moment you could be called upon to play either character,
oh man,
you stay
you
present.
Stay on.
And I think like that's such a nice skill too, because often when we perform, right, there are tag outs, there are second beats, there are things where like, oh, I'm going to need to play with this character and it's going to set me up, or it's going to allow me to set them up for more success if I'm almost like inside their head.
Yeah.
Right? Of like, I really understand this character, then my tag out with that character is going to be a lot more successful, right? Or like me doing a scene 10 minutes later with that character is going to be so much better if I'm really analyzing and trying to like play them in my head, you know?
Yeah. What a great, I love that exercise. I think it does everything we needed to do, which is bring awareness to the scene. We find how to match. We find how to heighten, continue on in our own aspect, right? It's not so much of, I think this other person would make that move. It's you encompassing that emotion or point of view and making your own choices from it. I think Karen did an exercise where we were all the same characters, like character monologues, right? And we would all just jump in to do that character monologue. And you would find that people would just jump on that point of view right away.
Yes.
Yeah, I love Karen. I think she's so good.
She's brilliant. And I think she's a genius and a talented improviser, but like her like superpower is her ability to make things simple.
Yes, she makes it so simple.
And I think like the longer I do improv, the more I realize like this is a caveman level pursuit we are doing. We want to make it complicated, and we often think, like I always joke that like when I was a student or even an early like kind of performer, you assume like once I get good enough, they unlock the room in the back and let me in there, and now I'm allowed to do spaceship scenes and time travel. So as you get better, things get more complicated.
Yeah.
But it's the opposite. Things get simpler the longer you do it. And the best people
Yes, they do.
are the best because they do those same simple 5 or 6 things better than anybody else.
They're good at that. Yeah, they're good at that 5, 6 things that everyone else is like, I wish I could do that at that
and
level.
it's like, oh, they just yes-anded harder than you. They were just listening more. They were just agreeing more or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And I think like Karen's really good. And like she's been such an inspiration. Also as a coach and a teacher, the exercises she designs, the notes she gives are so clear and focused and human.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think it's something we forget sometimes? Like we tend to like break apart shows and scenes as if they're these third-party endeavors or something like that.
Well,
but
we're
it's
so
like,
analytical at the end.
yes, but it's like it's humans, and we have to deal with the humans that made those choices and why they made those choices, and can we help them to make better choices?
Well, I think especially in a team, when I was on a team at IO, I would always be, we've made the best choices we could during a show, because no one really has time to really process their choices at that high speed of play. It's just we're doing the best we can at this time. And that really alleviated the type of pressure I would put on myself and alleviated the pressure that I would put on other people. Because it's like, if you make that choice, it's because you thought it was the best one. You're not doing that because, oh, here comes Chell, I'm going to make him do this thing. No, it's just like you're playing as fast as I am. And therefore, your choice is just to kind of react. And that's all we're doing on that stage.
Yes. Boy, in life and in improv, forgiveness is such a great attribute, right? Let's forgive ourselves and our teammates for the things they do in the heat of the moment, right?
Yeah.
Like we have to be able to forgive ourselves for the goofs and the gaffes that we made during a show. We have to forgive our teammates for the goofs and the gaffes they make. And then let's just move forward loving the work, right? Because I think that's another thing that we forget. And I certainly didn't know this and often still forget it. The notes you give after a show or a scene or a class should be benefiting the next show, scene, or class. Right? Sometimes I think it's hard not to operate as a teacher or a coach in a place of like, I need to point out all the mistakes to prove that I know more than you, or like, you know, you paid me to be here, so I got to point out every word you said wrong or something like that. Whereas really, notes are only to set people up for more success in the future, right? Because like you just said, we're doing our best. It's hard. We're making mistakes and we're getting excited and all these kind of things. To punish people for things they did 20 minutes beforehand doesn't really make any sense.
It doesn't help. No, you shame them, they won't make any moves at all.
No, and then we just leave the theater bummed out and less excited to come back and do more improv or resentful or
we're all
bitter.
doing this for free, right?
Yes.
So what's the point of continuing if I'm just going to be shamed, right? I'll just find a new hobby. I'll go knit, which I'm trying to start doing.
Oh, nice.
Thanks. So where can people find you? When are you performing? When are you teaching again? If people want to reach out to you, how can they do so?
Well, I'm on Facebook, Zach with an H, and then Huddleston, also with an H.
Nice.
And then I teach and will continue to teach at the Westside Comedy Theater. I usually teach a class a term, though it's often an advanced class. So if you're new to improv, tough luck. Get in line, suckers. But I coach and do everything else. And I just, I was mentioned it before, I started this business called Improv Capital, where we kind of are doing more like business skill focused improv workshops and classes and things like that I'm very excited about with my my partner, Chris Alvarado. So those are good places. And then, I'm performing. I'm a part of a wonderful group that have changed my life. They're all my best friends called Heyday. And we started at the IO, and we've been lucky enough to kind of land in a couple other theaters. And we do a few shows a month at the Westside where I teach. And we also have started this show called League of Fools at a theater in Hollywood called the Sacred Fools Theater. And it's kind of like a cool variety show with us and another improv group, Max. And we kind of bring in other acts. And sometimes there's magicians and musicians and other Ishins. Yeah. And so, and also I'll show up to your indie show and totally do 12 minutes of real sloppy, tag out heavy, crappy improv. I mean, I am a sucker for any improv. Please invite me to your dumb bit show. Invite me for your mashup garbage team that'll be performing at the clubhouse in front of nobody.
Zach will be there.
I'm in. I'm so in.
That's so great that you love the art form so much.
I mean, you know, because we both are in too deep.
Yeah.
It's in our blood. Our blood runs thick with callbacks and organic edits, right? Like we have the disease. It's terminal. We're not going to give it up.
Nope.
Right?
We're in it for life.
And I'm sure we've gone way over time, but I'm very much enjoying talking shop with you. Like one thing I was thinking about a moment ago that like I've always liked about watching you perform, and I think this is something we share in common, of like some of my favorite memories of my own performance, and I've seen you do this a bunch. I love like ends of shows, and when an end of a show goes well, there's nothing that feels better.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
And I think in particular, when you have maybe the penultimate line, the second to last line in a show, and you are setting up one of your teammates or ensemble mates to call back to that great character or that great line they said earlier. I love that. And frankly, I think that brings me more joy than actually having the last line that gets the big laugh and the lights pulled. And I feel like I've seen you do that a million times on Pockets and other shows. You make that. Kyle Moore does this. Macklin loves to do this. You have a bunch of people on Pockets that are great at this, but like that kind of that bump set for that other person to spike home.
Get ready for the homer.
Yes. And I feel it's a selfless thing, and the selflessness of improv is like one of the joys. And it's also like it's an improv nerd thing of like I feel like in the audience, you know, that line didn't get the laugh, but that was the real artistry right there.
You gotta have the door open.
Yes.
Someone has to open the door. Yeah.
And I think like a big part of my journey, because I was a shitty 20-year-old improviser, you know, who like judged my value by how many laughs I got and how many of the funny lines I said and all this kind of stuff. I feel like I started to enjoy improv so much when I got as much joy out of that bump set as I did out of the spike itself.
Yeah. Right. Well, it's ultimately like you're giving yourself to the team. You want the show to succeed. It's not about, man, I'm going to find a way to get my last line on there. You're making the best move at the best time possible in order to end the show correctly. And that's what it's all about. If we can all, going back to the beginning, if we can all find the goal of this is going to be the best show possible, and we all try to achieve that goal, then great things will come from that.
Yeah. And that's like the moments like sometimes you leave a theater or a show just walking 2 feet off the ground, right? Like you feel so good. And like those moments usually come from, it hasn't been like when I've had the best show or the funniest show or when I said the most funny lines or something like that. It's been when you hit that point of like losing sense of self and like you are just only invested in the show more so than in yourself or whatever. And you can, I've had shows where you leave the stage and you're like, I don't remember what words I said and what words they said. I just remember that they were said. And I was just so present in the work and I wasn't judging myself. That's what improv can do that I don't think a lot of other art forms can do. Maybe like dance, maybe like jazz or like great music, which are all things I can't do. So I can't really speak to it. That sense of losing yourself to an ensemble is so powerful. It's incredible.
It really is.
And I'm on a group and we're all wonderful and we've been performing together for a lot of years and I've been able to achieve it with them. Not every time, but I chase it every time. Like after you have that feeling of like leaving that stage with that feeling of like losing yourself for 25 or 45 or whatever minutes, that is the thing that you will chase for like the rest of your improv career.
Yeah.
Oh my God. And you rarely will.
No,
you rarely will.
No.
Maybe once a year if you're lucky, or once a month or something like that. But I mean, I've never experienced anything like that, I don't think. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for coming on to the podcast. Hey, that was episode 2.
If you like what you just heard, please rate, review, subscribe to the podcast. Every rate and review actually helps me get this podcast to other people who love improv, just like you. I feel very fortunate and lucky that you listen to this podcast, so thank you so much. Next week, we actually have a cool podcast coming up with another interview I did with Colleen Doyle. You're going to love it. Oh my God, I learned so much on that one, and it's coming straight to your ears. So please subscribe so that pops up as soon as you're available. If you're interested in Zach Huddleston, please find him on Facebook, Zach Huddleston. He will come to your shows if you invite him. He loves doing that stuff. Go watch him. Westside Comedy Theater. He teaches there. He does shows. He also does shows at Sacred Fools over here on Santa Monica Boulevard. He is performing everywhere. If you're interested in his business workshops, please reach out to him. Other than that, I hope you guys have a great week. Goodbye.
We got to do like 45 more minutes, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I got to start over another one.
I want to be however many episodes Paul Valancourt gets. I want one more.
Okay.
I love you, Paul.
I'm doing 3. I'm splitting this one up to 3. All right. Thank you so much.
All right.